Stack size and hand selection. Stack depth is a pre-flop filter. Your stack size changes which hands print expected value. It changes pot geometry, which changes how often you reach turns and rivers with meaningful stack-to-pot ratio. Use stack depth to decide if you should build linear versus polarized ranges and which hands can actually realize their equity. Online, this matters more because of rake drag, fast folds, and multi-tabling. You need clean, repeatable pre-flop rules. First, shallow stacks mean fewer streets, more all-in pressure, and higher value of high cards. Second, deep stacks mean more streets, more leverage, and higher value of hands that can make nutted hands. Equity realization, R, drives everything. If a hand cannot reach showdown or win big pots when it hits, it is a leak. The Poker Place Exploit Framework. First, the exploit. Titan-dominated offsuit opens and punish weak flats with aggressive 3-bets. Second, the risk. Over-tightening so much that you become capped versus uncapped and face relentless pressure. Third, the counter. Reintroduce suited wheel aces and suited connectors as stacks deepen, and defend with correct minimum defense frequency, or MDF. SPR and why deep stacks reward suited connectors. Stack depth maps directly to stack-to-pot ratio. Higher stack-to-pot ratio increases the payoff when you make strong, hidden hands. Suited connectors win by making straights, flushes, and strong combo draws. Those hands scale with stack size because their best outcomes are nutty and they stack top pair. Hands like 8-7 suited are not about raw pre-flop equity. They are about implied odds and leverage when ranges are wide and mistakes happen on later streets. First, at 30 big blinds to 60 big blinds, you realize fewer turns and rivers. 8-7 suited loses its best feature, multi-street pressure. Second, at 100 big blinds to 200 big blinds, you can check raise, barrel turns, and overbet rivers. 8-7 suited can realize and even exceed its equity. Third, deep stacks make reverse implied odds matter more. That hurts hands like King-Jack offsuit because top pair is not a stack-off hand. Deep stacks also shift you toward more polarized aggression. Your bluffs want equity and strong runouts. Suited connectors provide both. The Poker Place. Exploit Framework. First, the exploit. In deep online pools, attack players who overfold turns by using suited connectors as barrel candidates. Second, the risk. Overbluffing on boards that smash big blind defend ranges, you torch expected value. Third, the counter. Tighten barreling on low and connected textures and bring your frequencies back toward minimum defense. Frequency-based defense. Linear opens get tighter when stacks are shallow. When stacks get shallow, you want hands that make top pair and can stack off comfortably. Your opening range becomes more linear versus polarized ranges, specifically more linear and value dense. Shallow stack pots punish calls that rely on implied odds. Set mining with pocket fours without the right price is pure hope poker. In rake-heavy games, marginal suited hands lose even more because you do not get paid enough when you hit. First, raise more hands like ace-jack offsuit plus king-queen offsuit, pocket nines, and better. Second, cut hands like 9-8 suited, 8-7 suited, and weak-suited gappers that need deep stacks to realize. Third, reduce flats versus 3-bets with hands that cannot continue versus jams. Shallow stacks also compress post-flop. That increases the value of card removal. Your 4-bets and jams like blockers. Use blockers and unblockers to choose those. First, ace-5 suited through ace-2 suited block. Strong aces and keep playability when called. Second, king-queen offsuit blocks premiums but plays poorly when deep because it makes dominated one-pair hands. The Poker Place. Exploit Framework. First, the exploit versus shallow calling stations, value 3-bet, more linearly, and stop giving implied odds. Second, the risk. You become face-up and get 3-bet jammed on relentlessly. Third, the counter. Protect by mixing in suited blocker bluffs like ace-5 suited through ace-2 suited and defending correct minimum defense frequency versus steals. Button or cutoff versus big blind, deep stacks change the big blind defend. In position, you realize equity better. Deep stacks amplify that gap. Your button opens can widen, and big blind can also widen because implied odds go up. The result is more complex post-flop, more thin edges, and bigger punishment for range mistakes. This is where tracking software and population reads pay you. Keep your pre-flop plan clean. Split hands by how they win. First, value. Pocket tens and better, ace to queen suited, and better, ace-king offsuit. Second, playable. Ace-9 suited through ace. 2 suited, king-10 suited plus, queen-10 suited plus, jack-10 suited. Third, implied odds, 9. 8 suited, 8-7 suited, 7-6 suited, 6-5 suited. Fourth, dominated risk, king-jack offsuit, queen-jack offsuit, and worse, ace-10 offsuit. These lose expected value fast when deep if you play them passively. If big blind is weak post-flop, your suited connectors become premium opens. You get paid when they overplay one pair and underdefend turns. If big blind is strong and aggressive, you still open suited connectors, but you tighten your continuation plan. Your equity realization, R, comes from pressure and position, not from hoping to hit. The poker place exploit framework. First, the exploit. Widen button opens with suited connectors and punish fit or fold big blinds with turn barrels. Second, the risk. Widening too far and getting check raised off equity on boards that favor big blind. Third, the counter. Tighten weak offsuit broadways and keep a protected checking range so you are not capped versus uncapped. OOP deep is where dominated hands die. Out of position, your equity realization, R, drops. Deep stacks magnify that drop because more money is available to lose when you make second-best hands. This is why hands like king-jack offsuit and small pairs like pocket fours become problem hands from small blind or under the gun in tougher games. You need ranges that can defend multiple streets without guessing. First, from small blind versus button, prefer 3-bet or fold. Flatting creates low R, high rake, and capped ranges. Second, build more polarized 3-bets, deep, strong value, plus suited connector and suited ace bluffs. Third, play pocket fours as a pure fold versus large. 3 bets, unless stacks and sizing give real implied odds. Do not set mine by habit. Capped versus uncapped becomes the fight. When you flat too many middling hands out of position, your range caps, and the in-position player overbets turns and rivers. Use blockers and unblockers to select your out of position. 3-bet bluffs. You want hands that block strong continues and unblock folds. The poker place. Exploit framework. First, the exploit versus in-position players who over-c bet, check raise more with suited connectors that have equity and run-out coverage. Second, the risk, becoming too raise heavy and getting 3-bet jammed or called down correctly. Third, the counter, protect with stronger check, call ranges, and maintain minimum defense frequency on turns so you do not overfold to barrels. 3-bet pots, suited connectors as equity plus pressure. In 3-bet pots, ranges are tighter. Shallow stacks push you toward all-in thresholds. Deep stacks reopen multi-street lines. Deep suited connectors can be used as 3-bet bluffs because they retain equity when called and can attack capped calling ranges. Shallow, the same hands suffer because your fold equity is lower and your implied odds disappear. First, at 100 big blinds plus, 3-bet hands like 8-7 suited more often in positions where you can leverage turns. Second, at 60 big blinds or less, prefer ace-5 suited through ace-2 suited as bluffs. They have better blocker value versus 4-bets and jams. Third, when you call 3-bets with suited connectors, you must have a plan for check raises and turn barrels. No autopilot flats while multi-tabling. The poker place exploit framework. First, the exploit. Attack capped 3-bet callers with overbets and polar lines on favorable runouts. Second, the risk, forcing polarization on static boards where their range can comfortably meet minimum defense frequency. Third, the counter. Shift to smaller sizes and higher frequency betting when your range advantage is real and reduce bluffs without equity. Scenario box. Hero hand, 8 of spades, 7 of spades. Flop. Queen of hearts, 9 of clubs, 6 of spades. Action, cutoff, opens, button calls. Hero in big blind calls. 150 big blinds effective. Flop checks to button. Button bets 33%. Hero check raises. Deep stacks make this check raise credible. You represent two pair, straights, and strong draws. You also have equity when called. At shallow stacks, this line collapses into jam or fold territory. Your opponent realizes their equity too easily, and your bluff leverage disappears. Multi-way pots, suited connectors gain equity but lose fold equity. Multi-way is common in online pools at lower stakes and passive tables. Suited connectors gain raw equity because more players create more implied odds. You still need discipline. Multi-way reduces fold equity and makes domination problems worse for offsuit broadways. Deep multi-way pots reward hands that can make the nuts and apply pressure on turns when range is narrow. First, prefer 9. 8 suited, 8-7 suited, 7-6 suited over King-Jack offsuit in multi-way deep spots. Second, avoid calling raises with pocket fours unless the sizing and stacks give a clear path to win a full stack when you hit. Third, do not float multi-way with backdoors only. That is hope, poker at scale, and tracking software will show the bleed. The Poker Place Exploit Framework. First, the exploit. Value bet thinner when opponents overcall and refuse to fold draws. Choose suited connectors that make nutty rivers. Second, the risk, overvaluing non-nut flushes and paying off in deep pots. Third, the counter. Tighten your river bluff catches and choose blockers and unblockers that reduce their nut combos. Key takeaway. Stack depth selects your winners. Shallow stacks reward high card strength and linear versus polarized ranges that can stack off. Deep stacks reward nut potential, leverage, and high equity realization are: first, deep. Prioritize 9-8 suited, 8-7 suited, 7-6 suited, and suited aces. They scale with implied odds and multi-street pressure. Second, deep out of position, cut dominated one-pair hands like King-Jack offsuit and avoid capped, flatting strategies that invite overbets. Third, shallow, reduce suited connector frequency, increase value density, and use blockers and unblockers for 4 bets and jams. Fourth, play against pools, not theories. Use tracking software to find who overfolds turns, who overcalls rivers, and adjust while protecting minimum defense frequency. Now, let's test your edge. Question 1. According to the article, why is stack depth described as a pre-flop filter? Answer. Because it changes pot geometry and stack-to-pot ratio, which changes which hands can print expected value and realize their equity. Explanation. The article ties stack size to how many meaningful streets you play and whether a hand can reach showdown or win big when it hits. Question 2. What does the article say is the key driver behind which hands should be played across different stack depths? Answer. Equity realization, R. Explanation. The article states that if a hand cannot reach showdown or win big pots when it hits, it becomes a leak, especially as stack depth changes. Question 3. In the article's framework, how should your opening range shift when stacks are shallow? Answer. Become more linear and value dense, prioritizing hands that make top pair and can stack off comfortably. Explanation. The article explains that shallow stacks reduce implied odds and compress post-flop play, so marginal suited hands and set mining without proper price become hope poker. Question 4. What specific pre-flop adjustment does the article recommend from the small blind versus button when stacks are deep and you're out of position? Answer. Prefer 3-bet or fold rather than flatting. Explanation. The article says flatting out of position creates low equity realization, high rake, and capped ranges that invite pressure on later streets. Question 5. In the scenario box, 150 big blinds, what is the main reason the article gives for why the big blind check raise is credible? Answer. Deep stacks let you credibly represent strong value, 2-pair, and straights, while also having equity when called. Explanation. The article contrasts this with shallow stacks where the line collapses into jam or fold and bluff leverage disappears. Study hard, play smart. That's it for now. I'll see you in the next lesson.